In the 1950s, you could sit down in a diner and order a full plate for pocket change. The hamburger deluxe, the grilled cheese and tomato soup combo, and even a hearty sloppy Joe all stayed under $1, and some meals cost far less. These weren't just cheap plates. They were the everyday dinners that kept America fed, moving, and gathering around red vinyl booths. Hamburger deluxe with fries. The plate that showed just how far $1 could stretch in the 1950s often began with a hamburger deluxe. Diners pressed ground beef onto hot griddles, flattening the patty until the edges sizzled. A toasted bun held lettuce, tomato, onions, and a single pickle slice with a scoop of golden fries placed beside it. This was the affordable anchor of most diner menus, a meal families trusted on long evenings after work or travel. Ingredients were simple and cheap, and the flat-top cooking kept preparation fast. A full plate ran about 90 cents then, roughly $11 today. It faded as beef prices rose and fast food chains replaced slower counter service, and the next meal kept that same reliability for even less. Tomato soup and grilled cheese. A bowl of tomato soup paired with a crisp grilled cheese sandwich was the dependable warm meal almost every diner could offer. Cooks ladled canned or house-made tomato soup into enamel bowls, then set thick slices of buttered bread onto the griddle until the cheese melted between them. It was fast to plate, easy on ingredients, and always visually comforting. Costing around 65 cents in the 1950s, it delivered a full, filling meal that worked for children and adults alike. Rising dairy prices and changing lunch habits slowly pushed it out of dinner service, though it survived on kids' menus for decades. And one plate that came next stayed messy, hearty, and just as cheap. Sloppy Joe plate. The Sloppy Joe was the diner's practical solution to stretching ground beef into as many servings as possible. Cooks simmered meat with tomato sauce, onions, and a hint of sweetness, then spooned the mixture onto soft buns until it spilled over the edges. A pickle spear and a handful of fries completed the plate. It was fast to assemble and cost very little to produce, making it a reliable staple for travelers needing something substantial without spending more than 70 cents. As frozen meals and packaged mixes took over in later decades, diners shifted away from scratch versions. But in the 1950s, it remained a dependable bargain, and the next item showed how far a single slice of beef could go for under $1. Meatloaf with gravy and roll. Diners baked large pans of meatloaf each morning, combining ground beef with breadcrumbs, eggs, onions, and ketchup before slicing it thick and laying it onto plates. A ladle of brown gravy ran across the top with green beans or peas on the side and a warm roll placed nearby. This dish gave customers a full dinner experience at a price that hovered just under $1. It was inexpensive to prepare, required few ingredients, and fit neatly into the era's idea of a home-style meal away from home. Over time, rising beef costs and shifting dinner preferences pushed meatloaf off many diner menus. But in the 1950s, it was steady, generous, and always available. And the next plates in the lineup show how diners served full evening meals without crossing the $1 line. Fried chicken dinner. Diners prepared fried chicken throughout the day in the 1950s, dredging pieces in seasoned flour and lowering them into hot oil until the crust turned crisp and golden. A scoop of coleslaw and a wedge of cornbread completed the plate, giving travelers a full dinner for about $1. It was one of the most reliable evening meals a diner could offer, filling enough for families and fast enough for drivers passing through small towns. Rising labor and ingredient costs gradually made fresh fried chicken harder to serve at low prices, and many diners replaced it with quicker griddle items. But in its time, it represented the comfort of a home-style meal at a cost almost anyone could manage. And the next plate shows how diners made a hearty roast dinner just as affordable. If you ever slid into a booth and ordered off a menu like this, tap subscribe. We bring back forgotten meals like these every week. Blue Plate Roast Beef. The Blue Plate Special was a common sight in 1950s diners, usually featuring thin slices of roast beef laid across a heap of mashed potatoes. Cooks carved the beef early in the day, then spooned brown gravy over the plate until it pooled around the edges. Buttered peas filled the remaining space, making the meal feel complete without raising the price above 85 cents. Diners relied on the rotating nature of Blue Plate specials to manage costs, often using leftover roasts from the previous day. As menu variety expanded and margins tightened, Blue Plate specials faded, replaced by printed menus that changed less often. Still, in the 1950s, this was one of the best value meals you could buy, and the next dinner brought the same sense of comfort in a single flaky dish. Chicken pot pie. Diners baked chicken pot pies in metal tins, folding chunks of chicken, potatoes, carrots, and peas into a creamy gravy before sealing the top with a golden crust. The pies were prepared ahead of the dinner rush and kept warm in the oven, ready to plate within minutes. For roughly $1, travelers received a full meal contained beneath a browned, cracking surface that released steam the moment a spoon broke through. It was practical for cooks, economical for owners, and dependable for anyone looking for a filling dinner without spending more. As frozen pot pies became widely available, many diners shifted away from baking them daily, but in the 1950s, this dish offered the comfort of a home-cooked evening meal on the road, and the next plate took that same idea of a Sunday dinner and brought it to everyday diner menus. Roast pork with applesauce. Roast pork appeared frequently on 1950s diner dinner menus, sliced from large roasts cooked slowly throughout the afternoon. A spoonful of applesauce balanced the savory meat, paired with buttered corn or mixed vegetables, and often served with a warm roll. Though edging just above $1 in some regions, it still fit the era's idea of a hearty, affordable dinner. Diners liked the predictability of slow-roasted meats, slicing them to order and serving generous portions without additional cooking time. The plate gradually faded as pork prices shifted and faster cooking items became more common. But in the 1950s, it represented a steady, familiar evening meal that felt like home. And the next cluster shows how breakfast plates delivered some of the best bargains on any diner menu. Bacon and Eggs Breakfast Special. The bacon and eggs plate was one of the most dependable bargains in any 1950s diner. Cooks cracked eggs directly onto the hot griddle, frying them sunny side up, over easy, or scrambled, and sliding each portion onto a warm plate as soon as the edges set. Strips of bacon cooked beside them, laid flat until they curled slightly and turned crisp. Hash browns were formed from shredded potatoes pressed onto the griddle and browned until the surface turned golden, while the inside stayed soft. 2 slices of buttered toast, sometimes browned on the grill itself, completed the meal. This plate cost around 65 cents and offered a complete breakfast that fit every budget. Diners liked it because eggs and potatoes were inexpensive, quick to prepare, and reliable during the busiest morning hours. As fast food breakfast menus and prepackaged options grew, many diners shifted away from all-day eggs, but in the 1950s, this plate was a steady favorite for anyone starting a long drive, and the next item offered a bigger portion with the same early morning warmth. Pancake stack with sausage links. Pancakes were mixed in large metal bowls each morning, using simple ingredients that kept costs low: flour, eggs, milk, and a touch of sugar. Cooks ladled the batter onto flat tops in steady circles, flipping each cake when bubbles appeared and the edges started to dry. Finished pancakes were stacked 3 or 4 high and kept warm under heat lamps until the rest of the plate was ready. A spoonful of butter was placed on top, melting down the sides while a small pitcher of warm syrup was set beside the stack. 2 browned sausage links were added to balance the sweetness, giving the meal a satisfying finish. Travelers liked this plate because it felt generous, especially for 75 cents, and because it was easy to split among children without adding cost. Diners relied on pancakes during busy weekends when large groups came in at once, since they required only a few minutes from batter to plate. Over time, thinner crepe-style breakfasts and frozen mixes changed diner menus, but in the 1950s, pancakes remained a warm, dependable start to the morning, and the next meal kept the same comfort while adding one of the era's most recognizable diner touches: French toast with berry compote. French toast appeared in nearly every 1950s diner because it could be prepared quickly and used bread from the previous day. Cooks dipped thick slices into a mixture of beaten eggs and milk, sometimes adding a bit of cinnamon, then laid them on the griddle until the surface browned and the edges firmed. Many diners made their own berry compote by simmering strawberries or blueberries with sugar in small pots, stirring until the fruit softened and the syrup thickened. A ladle of compote was poured over the toast, giving the plate color and a bright visual appeal that stood out among the browns and golds of typical breakfast foods. Powdered sugar was often sifted lightly over the top, while a strip or two of bacon or a sausage sat on the side of the plate. At around 85 cents, French toast with compote offered a full breakfast with the kind of simple visual charm that made it a favorite among families on vacation. Cooks appreciated it because it required few ingredients and could be prepared quickly for the morning rush. As menus expanded, compote became less common, replaced by simpler toppings. But in the 1950s, this plate brought a cheerful start to the day, and the next item delivered an even heartier option for travelers looking for a stronger meal before heading back to the highway: ham steak with fried potatoes. The ham steak breakfast was for travelers who wanted something more substantial. Diners sliced thick pieces from large ham roasts, storing them in refrigerated cases, browning them on the griddle until the surface caramelized and the edges crisped. Fried potatoes were prepared in batches, chopped or shredded earlier in the day, and cooked in layers on the griddle until they turned golden. Cooks scooped the potatoes directly onto plates, adding a fried egg either on top or beside the ham, so the yolk could run across the potatoes. This plate cost just over $1, making it one of the priciest breakfast items, but still considered a bargain for the amount of food on the plate. Truck drivers often ordered it to fuel the first long stretch of their route, while families sometimes treated it as a vacation morning splurge. As meat prices rose and faster breakfast options became common, large ham steak plates began to disappear from many menus. But in the 1950s, it represented one of the most filling starts to the day, a plate that promised hours of steady energy. And the next items in the lineup returned to the midday meals that kept diners busy throughout the afternoon. Patty melt with onion rings. The patty melt was one of the most recognizable sandwiches in 1950s diners, and an easy favorite for customers who wanted something more substantial than a regular hamburger. Cooks shaped ground beef into thin patties, pressing them onto the griddle until the edges crisped and a thin layer of browned meat formed across the surface. Slices of rye bread were buttered on one side, placed face down on the griddle, and topped with either Swiss or American cheese. Once the cheese began to soften, the cooked patty was set between the slices, and the entire sandwich was pressed gently with a spatula to toast the bread evenly. In many diners, cooks placed a metal dome over the sandwich for a few seconds to help the cheese melt fully before flipping it once more. Onion rings were prepared by slicing onions into thick rounds, dipping them into seasoned batter, and lowering them into hot oil until the coating turned golden and bubbled. Baskets were shaken lightly to drain excess oil before plating. A full plate cost around $1, making it an accessible choice for lunch or dinner. As diner menus evolved and frying oil costs changed, hand-battered onion rings became less common. But in the 1950s, they paired perfectly with the buttery crunch of a patty melt, and the next meal used even fewer ingredients while remaining one of the cheapest, most reliable plates on the menu. Fried egg sandwich with hash browns. The fried egg sandwich was one of the most practical meals diners could offer. Cooks cracked eggs directly onto the griddle and fried them until the edges curled, keeping the yolk firm or runny depending on the order. 2 slices of bread were buttered and toasted on the same griddle, absorbing the flavor from earlier breakfast batches. The fried egg was placed between the slices, often with a small layer of cheese if customers requested it. Some diners wrapped the sandwich in wax paper for customers taking it to go, making it a popular choice for drivers who needed something quick and warm. Hash browns filled the rest of the plate, made from shredded potatoes pressed flat and cooked until one side crisped enough to flip in a single sheet. Cooks often used wide, flat spatulas to achieve clean flips during busy morning hours. At around 45 to 55 cents, this meal was one of the least expensive options available. As breakfast menus grew more specialized in later decades, simple egg sandwiches appeared less frequently outside morning hours. But in the 1950s, this was an all-day bargain that fit nearly every budget, and the next plate kept the same sense of value with a dish that appealed to diners across rural and coastal towns. Fish and chips. Fish and chips appeared on many diner menus in the 1950s because it offered a filling meal using inexpensive ingredients. Cooks dipped fillets of cod or haddock into a bowl of seasoned batter, coating each piece before placing it carefully into hot oil. As the fish fried, the batter puffed and browned, creating a crisp shell around the flaky center. The fish was lifted out with long-handled strainers and placed briefly on wire racks to drain. Meanwhile, potatoes were cut into thick strips, rinsed to remove excess starch, and fried in batches until golden. Some diners fried the potatoes twice for extra crispness, setting them aside between rounds as the lunch rush continued. The finished fish was laid onto the plate beside a mound of fries, with a small spoonful of tartar sauce and a lemon wedge added for simple garnish. A full portion cost about $1. Diners far from the coast used frozen fillets to keep the dish consistent, while those in river or lake regions relied on local suppliers. Rising seafood costs and the move toward faster griddle menus gradually pushed fish and chips into niche status. But in the 1950s, it was a hearty, reliable plate that brought a taste of the shore to towns far from the water, and the next dish continued that sense of warmth with a meal that simmered for hours before serving. Chili bowl with cornbread. Chili was one of the most dependable comfort meals in 1950s diners, prepared in large pots early in the morning. Cooks combined ground beef, onions, beans, and spices, stirring the mixture as it simmered until the flavors blended and the texture thickened. The chili was kept warm through the day, ladled into bowls as soon as customers ordered it. Some diners kept a row of small metal containers beside the chili pot, holding diced onions, a bit of shredded cheese, or sliced jalapenos for customers who wanted simple add-ons. Cornbread accompanied the bowl, baked in square pans and sliced into warm golden pieces with a crisp edge and soft center. The pans were often greased with melted shortening to help the corners brown. A full serving cost around 75 cents, making it a steady option for midday meals as temperatures cooled or drivers stopped late in the evening. Diners appreciated chili because it stretched ingredients and could be prepared in bulk, while customers valued it for its warmth and consistency on long trips. As canned soups and packaged mixes spread, some diners shifted away from slow-simmered chili. But in the 1950s, this was one of the most dependable meals on the menu, and the plates ahead returned to evening dinners before the desserts that closed many long days on the road. Cherry pie a la mode. Cherry pie appeared in almost every 1950s diner, usually displayed in a glass case near the register where customers could see each slice before ordering. Cooks prepared the pies in batches, rolling out dough on metal counters dusted lightly with flour and pressing it into deep pans. The filling was made by combining cherries with sugar and thickened syrup, stirred in large mixing bowls until the fruit was evenly coated. A lattice top was woven across the surface, brushed lightly with beaten egg to help it brown evenly in the oven. Once baked, the pies cooled on wire racks so the filling could set before slicing. When a customer ordered a piece, the waitress cut a clean wedge, lifted it with a wide metal spatula, and placed it on a small plate. A scoop of vanilla ice cream was added beside it, slowly softening against the warm crust. Some diners warmed the slice under a heat lamp for a few seconds to loosen the filling. The entire serving cost around 45 cents, making it one of the most accessible desserts available. As commercial bakeries expanded, many diners shifted to pre-made pies, but in the 1950s, house-baked cherry pie remained a steady presence. And the next dessert used the same simple approach with fresher fruit. Strawberry shortcake. Strawberry shortcake was a popular choice in diners because the ingredients could be prepared in the morning and assembled quickly throughout the day. Cooks baked biscuit-style cakes on sheet pans, cutting them into rounds or squares. Once cooled, strawberries were sliced in large stainless steel bowls, sprinkled with sugar, and left to sit until the juices collected and formed a bright syrup at the bottom of the bowl. When an order came in, a shortcake portion was split in half, with the bottom placed on the plate and topped with a ladle full of strawberries and syrup. The top half was set back on, followed by another spoonful of berries. Whipped cream was made in-house by whipping heavy cream in chilled metal bowls, then added by spoon or piping bag. Some diners added a small mint leaf or an extra drizzle of syrup for color. At about 50 cents, strawberry shortcake delivered a colorful, affordable dessert that balanced heavier dinner plates. Although packaged toppings and frozen berries eventually replaced fresh preparations, in the 1950s, this dessert relied on simple ingredients and fast assembly. And the next plate in the lineup offered a warm baked option that paired smoothly with ice cream. Apple cobbler a la mode. Apple cobbler served as a warm, reliable dessert in many diners. Cooks peeled and sliced apples in large batches, tossing them with sugar and cinnamon before pouring them into deep baking dishes. A crumb topping was made separately by blending flour, sugar, and butter by hand until coarse crumbs formed, then scattering the mixture across the apples. The cobbler baked until the topping turned golden and the filling bubbled at the edges. Once cooled slightly, portions were scooped out with wide spoons and placed into shallow bowls. Some diners reheated each scoop briefly under warming lights or on low oven racks. A scoop of vanilla ice cream was added on top, melting slowly across the warm apples and forming a glossy layer. Whipped cream or a sprinkle of cinnamon was sometimes used for a finishing touch. At around 55 cents, Apple cobbler delivered a substantial dessert at a modest price. As frozen desserts and canned fillings became more available, daily cobbler baking declined. But in the 1950s, it remained a steady choice on cooler evenings, and the next item provided a cold treat that became a signature of countertop mixers across the country. Chocolate or malted vanilla shake. Milkshakes in the 1950s were made using metal mixing cups clamped onto spindle mixers behind the counter. Cooks added scoops of ice cream, a splash of milk, and either chocolate syrup or powdered malt, depending on the order. The spindle mixed the ingredients until the texture thickened, and the mixture was poured into tall fountain glasses. The leftover shake remained in the metal cup, placed beside the glass to give customers an extra portion. Chocolate shakes used syrup added directly to the base, while malted vanilla shakes included malt powder that was stirred in for a nutty, old-fashioned profile. Some diners finished shakes with whipped cream and a single maraschino cherry placed on top from a jar kept near the mixer. Glasses were chilled in freezers before serving to help the shake maintain its thickness. At around 35 cents, this dessert doubled as both a treat and an accompaniment to meals. As equipment evolved, many establishments adopted pre-mixed bases, but in the 1950s, shakes depended on steady, hand-mixed preparation using simple ingredients. And the next cluster brings the final stretch of diner desserts, ending with plates that close countless evenings in red vinyl booths. The milkshake and fries combo became a common sight in diners by the late 1950s, especially among younger customers who preferred lighter meals paired with something cold and sweet. Cooks prepared the fries first, cutting potatoes into slender strips and rinsing them in cold water to remove excess starch. After draining, the strips were fried in batches until golden and crisp, shaken lightly in wire baskets to remove extra oil. While the fries finished, a metal mixing cup was set onto the spindle mixer behind the counter. Scoops of vanilla or chocolate ice cream were added with a splash of milk, and the mixture was blended until thick. The shake was poured into a tall glass, with the remaining portion left in the mixing cup beside it. Some diners served the fries in red paper-lined baskets, while others placed them on small side plates. The combination cost between 50 and 65 cents, making it one of the least expensive ways to get both a sweet and salty treat. As menus shifted toward faster service, fries and shakes continued to appear, but were often separated into different menu sections. In the 1950s, though, this pairing was a steady favorite that closed many late nights in small-town diners. And the next dessert brought the same sense of color with a warm, fruit-filled option. Blueberry muffin pancakes. Blueberry muffin pancakes offered a sweet breakfast-style treat that many diners served throughout the day. Batter was prepared in large bowls, sometimes with a bit of muffin mix added to give the pancakes a softer, crumb-like texture. Fresh or canned blueberries were folded in gently to prevent the fruit from breaking and spilling juice across the batter. Cooks poured the mixture onto the griddle in round portions, flipping each pancake once the first side bubbled. Finished stacks were kept warm under low-heat lamps. A pat of butter was added on top, melting slowly down the edges, followed by a small pitcher of syrup placed beside the plate. Some diners dusted powdered sugar over the stack to highlight the blueberries visible across the surface. A serving typically cost around 85 cents, making it a colorful alternative to heavier desserts. It remained popular for families traveling long distances because the pancakes could be shared easily. As menus modernized, blueberry pancakes stayed common, though the muffin blend variation appeared less frequently. In the 1950s, it offered a familiar warm plate that worked at any hour of the day. And the next dessert took the visual appeal even further with multiple layers, sauces, and a trio of preparations. Banana split sundae. The banana split sundae was one of the most visually striking desserts on any diner menu in the 1950s. Cooks selected ripe bananas and sliced them lengthwise, placing each half against the sides of a long glass dish. 3 scoops of ice cream, typically vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry, were set in the center. Each scoop received its own topping. Chocolate syrup over the vanilla, strawberry sauce over the strawberry, and pineapple or caramel sauce over the chocolate. Whipped cream was piped across the top in thick swirls, followed by chopped nuts sprinkled over the surface. A maraschino cherry was added to each scoop, taken from glass jars stored in the refrigerator. Some diners added a thin drizzle of chocolate syrup along the edges of the dish for extra visual detail, and others used long-handled dessert spoons so customers could reach each layer easily. A banana split cost around 55 to 65 cents, making it an impressive dessert for the price. It served as both a shared treat and an individual indulgence depending on the order. As dessert manufacturing and soft-serve machines spread in later decades, banana splits became less frequent, but in the 1950s, they were a centerpiece dessert on many menus, and the next plate scaled the idea down into a simpler, warm option prepared in large batches. Rice pudding with cinnamon. Rice pudding was one of the most economical desserts served in diners, prepared in large pots on back burners where it could simmer slowly through the morning. Cooks combined rice, milk, sugar, and a small amount of butter, stirring periodically to prevent sticking. The mixture thickened gradually, forming a smooth, creamy base that was portioned into shallow bowls. Diners often topped each serving with a dusting of cinnamon or a small spoonful of raisins. Some restaurants chilled the pudding for a firmer texture, while others served it warm, depending on the time of day. This dessert cost between 20 and 30 cents, making it one of the cheapest items on the entire menu. Its low cost and simple preparation allowed diners to keep it available even on slower days. As pre-made puddings and packaged mixes became more common, fresh rice pudding appeared less frequently, though it remained a nostalgic favorite for many customers. And the final dessert brought the same simplicity with a baked approach that dated back generations. Bread pudding with raisins. Bread pudding offered diners a way to use leftover bread without waste. Cooks tore bread into small pieces, arranged them in deep pans, and poured a mixture of milk, eggs, and sugar over the top. Raisins were scattered throughout before the pans were placed in the oven, where the mixture baked until the surface browned and the center set. Once cooled slightly, squares were cut and transferred to small plates. Some diners poured a light vanilla sauce over the top, made by heating milk and sugar with a bit of cornstarch until thickened. Others added a sprinkle of cinnamon to give the plate more color. Bread pudding cost around 25 to 30 cents, making it another low-cost dessert that relied on ingredients diners always had on hand. As commercial bakeries and refrigerated desserts expanded, bread pudding became less common on modern menus. But in the 1950s, it was a dependable option, served warm or chilled depending on the day's batch. And from here, the final reflections return to the meals that defined the era and the places where they were served. In the 1950s, diners prepared meals with steady routines, simple tools, and ingredients that stayed affordable for families and travelers. Plates were assembled quickly on flat tops. From sliced meats and baked casseroles to warm biscuits and small desserts kept ready in display cases. These dishes reflected a time when a few coins could cover a full dinner, a treat, or a late-night stop during long drives across small towns and busy highways. If any of these plates reminded you of meals served in your own local diner, there are many more stories in the menus of that era still waiting to be uncovered. Tap like and subscribe so you never miss the next chapter.